Hello. We are ready to start now. I have the pleasure to moderate this part of the session. Oversight of the accountancy and audit profession, prerequisite for conducting high-quality engagements. Supravegherea profesiei contabile, condiție esențială în realizarea misiunilor de înaltă calitate. Invitații noștri sunt în acest panel. Our guests are here. Mr. Peter Chris from the Federation of European Experts, President of the Federation of European Experts, Wolfgang Bohm, Common Content, Francesco Capalvo, IFAC, Mr. Yarovenko, Cristina Diola, Mrs. Cristina Diola, and Michel Cartier-Lecherinel. The procedure is as follows. I'll invite each speaker to address some words, some messages, and their messages from there in front of you. You are able to ask questions if you want. Now I want to invite Mr. Peter, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great that I came to Russia. I like it here. It's the first time. But I would like to offer some maybe scene-setting views and ideas about the oversight in after the audit reform, because this is a bit changing the scope of what we were used to. I'm just very short introduction of me. You do see here our member bodies from Europe, and it's very difficult to find the blind spot where we are missing a member. I would say that considering the directive, and now forget the regulation, what is the directive here requiring come up with? It states the ultimate responsibility for the competent authority. The competent authority is the term used in the directive for what we call the public oversight. And they keep the ultimate responsibility for the approval and registration of auditors, adoption of relevant standards, continuing education, quality assurance system, and investigative and administration disciplinary systems. So this is what they need to keep. It's the ultimate responsibility, but of course they can delegate. And we come to that later on. The directive is clear that the competent authorities are responsible for the quality assurance reviews, investigations, and disciplinary matters, and these are the three items that they are not able to delegate to professional audit. So they need to keep these three items. For the rest, it is a decision of either the legislators or of the oversight what they delegate to professional organizations. And this means, because that in many cases the situation that we have seen in Europe is that the full inspection work was delegated to the professional bodies, and the oversight was really just overseeing the practice, making sure that the inspections happen, that the results are assessed, and that the disciplinary measures are taken. Now, with this new requirement, it's pretty clear that the oversight needs to develop their own inspection units to be able to perform the legwork at the audit firms, at the individual auditors, and do it themselves. This is one of the challenges that in most of the countries, the public oversight bodies needs to address. And yeah, I would like to stress that on the quality assurance reviews, there is a frequency. There are two issues to consider. One is the current requirement already that the PI auditors need to be reviewed at least once or 3 years. The other auditors need to be reviewed every 6 years, but there is additional requirement there that these reviews needs to be risk-based. That means in many cases that, for example, the large firms would be reviewed every year, maybe just sections of their work. And also this means that in the case that they find some troubles with some audit firm, it's quite likely that they will come in a year or two rather than 3 to review whether the situation has been rectified. That's also what we should expect. And it's also clearly said that the reviews should be appropriate and proportionate to the scaling complexity of the client. Of course, this means that they will probably spend significantly less time when they review small audit clients, and they could spend a lot of time reviewing the largest assignments, banks, complex groups, etc. If you look on the regulation, the regulation in the case of the public oversight is covering just very small part. A lot of the issues have been shifted into the directive, which means that the member states are have slightly more freedom to decide how to structure the oversight system. But what is in the regulation is clearly the requirement that the oversight bodies in Europe do cooperate, because we have a lot of groups that are cross-border, so there needs to be cooperation on the inspection side as well. And there is also the creation of the C.A.F.R, which is the Committee of European Audit Oversight Bodies. That will be a new body established June to next year. That will really coordinate the oversight in Europe. This body will be, they will elect their own chairman, which will be one of the oversight bodies from Europe that will chair it. They will have also international activities, so it's not only Europe, but also cooperation with PCOB in the United States and similar bodies in the key other economies, China, India, Asia. So the first is really the cooperation and oversight of this, that this body is in charge. Then also the assessment of public oversight systems of set countries, because there's a really, again, similar system that the PCAOB is applying also, but they are really looking, is the quality of the public oversight in certain countries sufficient enough that we can rely on it? If it is not, that means that they might be coming for inspections or looking at the working papers much more closely. And sadly, it's also the international cooperation. You know probably that there is C.A.F.R, which is the international body where all the oversight systems are members of. So there is a global level. So cooperation of Europe, of C.A.F.R with this C.A.F.R body is one of the tasks definitely. Also some multilateral arrangements that will definitely come, because particularly in the audit of the large groups, it's important that the oversight bodies cooperate, because the group auditor really needs also to cooperate with a lot of auditors auditing the individual companies throughout the world. If you imagine, for example, HSBC Bank, it's nearly everywhere. So, I would like now to highlight a couple of the issues that needs to be considered when the new system is being designed, and a couple of the questions that every member state would really need to answer to decide. Firstly, it's the PIE definition. Its obligatory part is listed companies, banks, and insurance companies. What member states are able to add? Anything else that they really consider to be public interest. I think we should stress that the public interest should be in corporate reporting. There are some important institutions, but their financial results are not that critical, but they are important for other reasons. Yeah, we should really be looking on the importance of the corporate reporting side. And of course, There needs to be a consideration between, on one side, the capacity of the public oversight, and then also the number of the PIs and PI audit that they need to supervise, because it's interrelated, of course. So the capacity needs to be aligned to the PI definition as well. Then, theoretically, the public oversight could do everything themselves. However, what we do see in most of the European countries is that they do delegate, and mostly they delegate to professional organizations, chambers, institutes. And here they need to, again, to decide what do they do themselves. They need to do minimum the 3 issues that I mentioned. That means the inspection, disciplinary sanctions of the PI auditors and audits. And what they could delegate. Again, this needs to be aligned to the capacity that the public oversight has, and also I would say to the with regard what the professional accounting organization can offer for capacity to do the rest. The experience from Europe is showing that, for example, the registration of auditors is usually delegated down to the professional body. In many places, even the audit of the inspection of non-PI audits is delegated to the professional body. And that is quite interesting debate in the situation that they decide to delegate about who is doing the inspection of the non-PI audits that are done by the PI auditors. This needs to be decided because it's somewhere in the middle. In many cases, it stays with the public oversight directly because they need to review the whole system of the audit firm, the quality systems, whatever. And when they do that, they just add a few non-PI audits to that because they understand the quality assurance system inside the firm. But in other countries, they decided even to delegate this bit to the professional accounting organizations. And it's of course the issue of the governance, that means how is the public oversight body structured. Again, here we see systems, sometimes it's nominated completely by the Minister of Finance, sometimes various organizations do have their own seat in the governance board. The system that we do have in Czech Republic is working quite well because the law is saying that in the board you need to have experts. It's appointed by the Minister of Finance, but in agreement with the central bank, which basically there is a check and balance that you really have experts who understand the issues. Then the next issue to cover is really, I call it staffing and remuneration of the inspectors, which is really the key issue to decide, because on one side, and particularly in the Central and Eastern Europe, it's quite difficult to find knowledgeable inspectors for the review of the auditors, because the profession doesn't have such a tradition, and a lot of the people, once you become auditor, you do it basically until you retire. In many countries, Western countries, it's much more flexible. People do sometimes a bit of audit, later on they move to C.A.F.R rules, then they move something. So there's much bigger, I'd say, crowd of people available, experts available for the inspection units. But yeah, it is an issue, and it's also connected with remuneration, because in the situation that the public oversight board is part of the government system, then usually it's subjected to the salary tables that are applicable for state servants. And this can provide additional barrier to get the right people for the inspection units, because they are usually particularly from the business side, used to have slightly different salaries than the state could offer. In many situations, this is being solved by having the status of the public oversight slightly different preset. That's not a state agency, but it's basically something set by the law that is independent, in which situation they are not bound by the state salary tables. But usually you need them to sort out the funding system of the oversight, because once it is funded from the state budget, you usually quite quickly get the state salary tables attached to that. So in this situation, there are then systems of various multi-channel funding. Sometimes it comes from the public interest entities. Sometimes it comes from the professional organization who collect the subscriptions from the audit firms. Sometimes there are systems where the stock exchange is involved and they collect it through fees of the listed companies. So there could be various systems how to structure the funding of the oversight to ensure that they really can get quality people. And lastly, I think the key issue also here is, and it's important for us as the profession, the cooperation. I would expect that a well-set public oversight is not basically a unit that is closed, but there is the communication with the audit profession inside the country, is the C.A.F.R to get the best practices from other countries as well, with I.F.R at the global level. And I think this is really pretty important to get the right infrastructure built in the country for good governance, good functioning of the public oversight, and for really bringing the trust in the society. So reputation, and again, all this comes from who they are, how do they perform the job, and how they communicate. So I wanted to share these few things at the beginning of this discussion. And should we have the Q&As now, or would you like to do that at the end?
Dacă dorește cineva să adreseze o întrebare acum, we have now the stand time for questions, or we can go further on. Sau adresăm la final, cum doriți. If you want to address a question, dacă doriți să adresați o întrebare, just raise your hand. Ridicați mâna. I guess we can go further on.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Wolfgang Baum, Government Intent, Professional Accountancy Qualification. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, that's me up there. But in my day job, I actually work for the German Institute, the Institute of Wirtschaftsprüfer, and am Director of Assurance and Related Services Standards. Now, I'm not going to be able to cover everything on my slides today. I'm going to concentrate on a few issues like the current member institutes, the project purpose and background, the common content model, and the new EU law regarding education. Now, the title of today's workshop is Oversight of the Accountancy and Auditing Profession, Prerequisite for Conducting High-Quality Engagements. Now, common content is all about education and training. And in my view, and in view of the members of the Common Content Project, there is no greater prerequisite for high-quality audits than training and education. Now, the next question is, of course, what does that have to do with oversight of the accountancy and audit profession? Well, when I get into new EU law regarding education, I'll close that circle. So let's start first with the current members. As you can see, most of the leading countries in Europe are members, full members. Belgium joined as an associate member last year and is working towards full membership. And I'm pleased to report that Romania has, that is the chamber, has become an associate member since the end of September. And I presume you're also going to be working towards full membership as soon as you can. So you can see there's a lot of leading institutes, but we're also shooting for more. Now, what's the project purpose? The project purpose is to develop, maintain, and unify high-quality audit and accounting education benchmarks. So it's all about setting benchmarks, minimum benchmarks for education and training in the profession. And why do we have this project at an international level? Well, because we have globalized issues that are common across the profession. And we have diverse stakeholders whose needs we have to meet. So I'm going to give you a little bit of project background, because this project has been around for a while, even though it's not that well known. It actually started back in 2000, but it took us till about 2006 to get agreement on what our common qualification requirements would be. And we went through a fairly detailed cross-institute review of our qualifications, which then allowed us some feedback. So by 2010, we had set our qualification requirements for our member institutes. Now, why did we do all this? You'll note that more and more what auditors need to have competencies in are international. I can mention the examples of IFRS or ISAs or EU independence rules, the ESMA Code of Ethics. It's all become more international. But it's not all international. There are still challenges to harmonization. I mean, business and tax law and national standards are all not harmonized. There are local business practices and needs. And the one thing we found is it's impossible to harmonize national education systems. There's too much tradition, national tradition involved in educational systems to harmonize those. So what did we do to solve that problem? We decided to use a model that we call a common content model. So we would require a certain common content for those areas that are international. And then we would add the requirement for national content for that content that's national. And the national content is determined by the National Institute or Chamber. So that's how it essentially works. I'll move back a little bit. What else did we do? We decided, because we cannot harmonize educational systems, we would retain national audit and accountancy qualifications. So this is a cooperation of national institutes. We're not looking for an international institute here. And we would not harmonize the educational system at all. Rather, we would harmonize learning outcomes and required knowledge. So, in other words, every institute has to meet the common learning outcomes for the common content. It doesn't matter how you get there. What matters is that you meet them at the end. The other thing we did is we added a compliance system. I talked about the reviews previously. What we had are teams of international educational experts drawn together from other countries that go in and actually check the qualification, make sure it meets the requirements. We also have an independent oversight committee that ensures that the process for accepting new members and also the review process is done fairly. This is important because you can always be accused of, oh, we'll help our friends and keep out our enemies, or, but that's not the way this works. We wanted to make sure that it's seen to be fair. So, I move on to the common content model. It complies with the EU Audit Directive and international education standards. We're in the process right now of finalizing our changes to our educational requirements so that they're in line with the new international educational standards. This is not a small curriculum. We've got over 100 pages of nature extended knowledge. And we've divided it into a number of areas like assurance, related services, performance measurement reporting. That's essentially financial reporting, both internal and external. And some of the other areas that are important for auditors to know about. Now, I'm going to move quickly to what I think is really important. This is closing the circle to the issue of oversight. There's a much overseen rule that was issued in the EU Audit Directive, which essentially says that the competent authorities, that's the public oversight over the profession, are supposed to cooperate to harmonize education. in the Common Content Project, we did actually do some successful lobbying and said, well, that's fine, but at least you should take out the harmonization. You should take into account the harmonization already achieved by the profession. And the EU Parliament and the European Commission agreed with us, so they added the last sentence. Now, there is no other organization other than Common Content that's presently engaged in harmonizing the profession. So that's us, right? And we think it's really important that the profession become active in this area. And this goes back to one of the issues that Peter Chris provided in his overview, is the fact, how much are public oversight bodies going to delegate? How much are they already have a particular responsibility. How much of that responsibility will they delegate? They do have to take into account what's being done by the profession. The question is how much. So I think it's important for the profession to get into this game early, to ensure that the voice of the profession is heard, and that the needs of the profession, and above all, the needs of the stakeholders of the profession, are appropriately taken care of. Now, there's another article. They're also responsible for harmonizing things like the adaptation period and aptitude test. That's essentially the national content part. So we believe Common Content also provides a model for helping oversight authorities harmonize the adaptation and the aptitude test required when you move from one EU member state to another. And the other important thing is that we believe that Common Content is not just a question of de jure portability. Because we've harmonized learning outcomes, it's de facto portability, which is probably much more important in practice. Now, some of you may have heard of the Professional Qualifications Directive. Some of you may not have. But there is this wonderful section in there that talks about common training schemes. And I'm not going to go through all the details here. Suffice it to say that if particular bodies within the European Union in certain countries get together and develop a common training scheme, and by the way, it does refer to learning outcomes in that law, in the EU directive, then you can file and become a common training scheme, which means you would be officially recognized by the European Union. So one of our objectives is to ensure that we get enough members so that we can be recognized as a common training scheme. Here you can see a common set of knowledge and skills and competencies, applicable in at least 1/3 of all member states. So we're shooting for the 1/3 of all member states. The fact that Romania has joined and Belgium, of course, has brought us far along the way in meeting that, and we hope to get a few members soon. Suffice it to say, we think that education is front and center when it comes to the quality of audits, and that we're going to have to engage with our public oversight bodies in another couple of years when they get started on harmonizing these things. And we think Common Content and the professional bodies that are its members will have an important role to play here. You can get more information from the Common Content website about the project. And so now I'm open for questions. If any.
There are any questions now? Romanian or English or whatever? We have a question there. Make a Q&A session at the end for the speakers. Now I want to invite Mr. Atelierul as the next speaker. Thank you very much. Okay, and then Mr. C.A.F.R.
Dear colleagues, I'm sorry, my English really difficult, and I tell for Russian and interpreter tell for Romanian. Okay? Thank you very much. Тема моего доклада касается внутреннего финансового аудита в общественном секторе. Федеральным законом еще 2 года назад в бюджетный кодекс Российской Федерации были внесены изменения. В частности, впервые в кодекс было определено, что к полномочиям распорядителей бюджетных средств и администраторов доходов бюджета относится осуществление внутреннего финансового аудита. Я хочу подчеркнуть, внутренний финансовый аудит впервые появился 2 года назад в бюджетном секторе. Органы власти осуществляют внутренний финансовый аудит на основе функциональной независимости. Внутренний аудит осуществляется в соответствии с порядком, установленным соответственно правительством Российской Федерации, высшим органом исполнительной власти субъекта Российской Федерации или местной администрации. Правительство России постановлением 2014 года утвердило правила осуществления распорядителями средств федерального бюджета и администраторами доходов бюджета порядка осуществления внутреннего финансового аудита. Для остальных органов власти Министерство финансов в этом 2015 году направило методические рекомендации по осуществлению внутреннего финансового аудита. Субъектом внутреннего финансового аудита является уполномоченное на осуществление этого аудита подразделение либо администратора бюджетных средств, обособленное или в составе другого структурного подразделения. А должностное лицо субъекта внутреннего аудита не может осуществлять действия по изучению проведенных им операций, действий по формированию документов, необходимых для выполнения внутренних бюджетных процедур. Деятельность этого субъекта внутреннего финансового аудита основывается на принципах законности, объективности, эффективности, независимости, профессиональной компетенции и системности. Все это во всех порядках внутреннего аудита
в строгом и полном выполнении правовых норм, регулирующих процесс внутреннего финансового аудита, принцип объективности и профессиональной компетенции выражается в применении соответствующими должностными лицами и работниками
skills and other competencies.
знаний, навыков и других компетенций, позволяющих субъекту внутреннего
Internal financial audit impartially, efficiently, and to avoid conflicts of interest of any kind to the accomplishment of the subject of the internal financial audit goals and objectives. The principle of efficiency means that the financial audit should proceed from the need to achieve the best audit results with the least amount spent on its resources, that is, financial, human, and material resources. The principle of independence means the absence of conditions that threaten the ability of the subject of the internal financial audit impartially and objectively carry out their duties. The principle of consistency means that the implementation of the internal financial audit identified risks and violations are analyzed in order to assess the reliability of the control system for the internal budgetary procedures. The organization of the internal financial audit is necessary that the internal financial audit was directed as follows. First of all, to assess the reliability of internal financial control and the preparation of recommendations to improve its effectiveness, and to confirm the reliability of the budgetary accounts and the compliance of the budget accounting methodology and accounting standards of the budget established by the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation. The preparation of proposals to improve the economical and efficiency of use of budgetary funds. The subject of internal financial audit is to assess the effectiveness or reliability and the quality of internal financial control, including through the implementation of audit operations. The internal financial audit carried out by means of scheduled and unscheduled audits. Scheduled inspections are carried out in accordance with the annual plan of internal financial audit approved by the head of the Chief Administrator of Budgetary Funds. The subject of internal financial audit is entitled to prepare opinions on the validity and completeness of documents of budgetary funds allocated to the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation for the preparation and review of the draft budget. Audits are divided as follows. On-the-desk audits, which are conducted at the location of the subject of the internal financial audit on the basis of a priorly submitted request. On-site inspections, which are conducted at the location of the object of the audit, and on the combined tests, which are held both at the location of the subject of internal audit. Officials of the subject of internal financial audit in conducting the audit are eligible for request and receive reasoned request document materials and information necessary for audits, including information on the organization and on the results of internal financial control.
А в большинстве поселений нет кадров, которые способны осуществить данные полномочия. Вот сегодня утром я сказал слова о том, что аудит и аудитор должен быть своевременным. Вот решение законодателя о том,
чтобы внедрять внутренний финансовый аудит, тоже должно быть своевременным. Спасибо.
Thank you very much.
At the end. Now I want to invite Mr. Francesco Capalbo. Thank you very much for that protest. Let's switch them to the places.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Radu, and thank you, distinguished guests and ladies, for inviting me over. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge the role that the Chambers of member for more than 10 years, and now recently we have Clement Keys on the Professional Accountancy Organization Development Committee, and is taking the Romanian experience. Before getting into the, getting straight ahead into the topic today, I'd like to make sure we all know what I.F.E.C. is. I.F.E.C. is an organization that actually is representing some 175 members and spread over 130 jurisdictions. That means almost the whole world. And we have like 2.84 million accountants. So this is a huge number of people dealing with numbers. So it's kind of a student nightmare. But actually, what is important to understand, that accounting is not just about numbers. This is very important to understand. That accounting is not just about numbers, because accounting is mainly about communicating. It's about communication. And communication has got several perspectives. It's got social perspective, it's got behavioral perspective, environmental. And indeed, when we watch from different perspectives, we end up with different reports. We have a social report, environmental report. We have a integrated report, as someone talked about. And what we need, of course, in the public interest, all those reports are trusted and reliable and relevant. And this is actually in the public interest. But in order to have that, we need two things. We need, first of all, to have skilled and ethically committed preparers and skilled and ethically committed auditors. But you also need that the public opinion perceive these people as such. It's not just how skilled and independent we are, but also how we are perceived from the public opinion. It's important the public opinion understand that we are not, as we were saying this morning, number wizard. We do use numbers, we do use technological terms, but it's not hocus pocus. We're not trying to conceal, rather trying to reveal. So, but in order to change this public opinion attitude and also to work on our substance, we cannot be alone. It cannot be done by a single auditor or a single accountant in his own office. It cannot be done by public association, a public accounting association standing alone. It has to be all together. And this is actually the main role of I.F.R. What I.F.R. is trying to do is trying actually to supporting the development of a strong profession. And the development of a strong profession this is done by agreeing on best practice, setting principles, auditing principle, accounting principle, in working to have those principles implemented. We all know that rules or principles are nothing if they're not properly implemented. We need to have, of course, the rules and practice need to be, of course, on the same line. And in order to do so, what I.F.R. is doing is supporting the profession, is developing standards, is favoring the adoption of the standard, and last, but very far from least, is speaking out in the name of the profession. This is increasingly important. The I.F.R. speaks with the International Monetary Fund, with World Bank, G20, G8. We need the accounting perspective to be heard before and in advance. Let's think about what happened in Greece. You set deficit procedure on the base of numbers, but if you don't get sure that those numbers are reliable, then you're doing nothing. No? I just say you have to respect this number. Your deficit has to be, okay, this is my deficit, fine, full stop. You need an accounting perspective to be heard before, to be heard in advance. And doing all this job, what I.F.R. is trying is always trying to keep the pace of the world. And in order to do so, we have investigated what are the future trends that are affecting our profession. And basically, we identified three main points that I want to discuss with you today. It's globalization, technology, and people. So we start from globalization, okay? Well, globalization has been around for years, you know? It's about 20 years that everyone is talking about globalization. But as accountants, we know how real it is. Why? Because if you think about it, globalization always has got an economic core. It always starts for economy. It's when Marco Polo traveled east. It was for economic reason. It's when Cristoforo Colombo sailed west and unfortunately discovered the America. And it actually is for economic reasons. So what we have is not definitely what we have is what we can call a global economic infrastructure. And entities, and business entities, navigate along that infrastructure. But unfortunately, they enter in different seas. And each sea has got a regulatory environment that has been developed according to the cultural settings. We do know, and accounting literature has demonstrated how strong is the relation between the cultural environment and accounting regulation. Now, of course, the more diversified are those regulations, the more difficulties these entities will encounter when navigating that intersection. What we're trying to do as an accountant, also as an auditor, is to help those clients, to help those entities to navigate those seas. And what we can do for that, definitely we have to work on training of the people. You were talking about common consent. But we can also try not just to have skilled sailors. We can try to have quieter seas. How? Working on regulatory consistency. Trying to reduce the difference, at least in accounting concern. So this is what I.F.R. is trying to do, is trying to reduce the regulatory differences. So favoring regulatory consistency, and doing that by preparing the standards, and doing that also by interacting with the regulators. And indeed, one of the most well-known work of the I.F.R. is supporting the standard setting. We're supporting the standard setting of the International Accounting, the ISA, International Standard Auditing.
let's see what happened now with the directive we're talking now. Well, actually, this is a confirmation. But they say we can use international standard of auditors. Why? Because those standards weren't there. You have to first prepare the basis and then to offer it. If those standards weren't there, the European Union would never say, okay, you use that. It's almost happened already for the private sector, right? With the International Financial Reporting Standard. The International Accounting Standard Board, once called International Accounting Standard Committee, was born in '71. And then it became famous just like in the beginning of the 20th of this century. And so we do with standards. We favor the development of accounting education standards. We talk about education, we don't need to talk anymore. And also, for as far as the ethic is concerned, of course, the ethical issue is increasingly important, especially after the big scandal that we've seen like Enron, Parmalat, and the like. But let me stay a bit more on the last point, which is I personally most interested. The International Public Sector Accounting Standard Board. What we need comparable and reliable public sector financial report. Why? Because people has the right to know. People has the right to know the way their resources is being used. And the accounting profession has the duty to ensure that they are properly informed. It's the duty to ensure that they've been informed according to certain given and agreed set of rules, and to ensure that those financial reports are compliant with the agreed regulation. This is a key point. We cannot, and this is a key point not just for economic crisis, but also for corruption. I think you like football, you know, Romania like football, Argentina, or Italy kind of like football, just a little bit. And so we do know what happened at the FIFA level, at the corruption. We know how corruption is bribery is a big problem all over Europe. Like we have a kind of a first prize in corruption in Italy, but still I think it's a common content as well. I think we quite share that. And therefore, the only thing we can do is to ensure that those are well prepared standards. But we do prepare all these standards not just in the interest of the profession, which is very important. We do that in the public interest. Indeed, one of the main concerns of the C.A.F.R is to guarantee the independence of those boards. We have a kind of shared, let's say, private-public sector model with the oversight, the nominating committee. Is trying to guarantee the independence of standards. And is it working? Well, actually, I don't know if we. Sorry, I forget that. It is. I need to change it. It is working. Well, you can judge whether it's working or not, but I can tell you that we have more than 100 jurisdictions using international standard of audit. We have more than 120 jurisdictions that have developed their code of ethics for professional accounting on the basis of those standards, and we have more than 80 governments and public sector entities applying the International Public Sector Accounting Standards. Well, there should be a lot to talk about the EPSAs and the IPSAs, but I will leave that at the next conference because there will be enough time for that. And so this is basically the first point. The second point we was talking about is technology. Well, I will not spend too much on technology because I can see there is also some other presentation on technology, but certainly technology has changed a lot in our profession. We have spoken this morning about the use of IT. There is no way you can do an audit if there is an EDP working there. You will not find any audit trail if there is an electronic data processing system working. You have to work on that. But there will be other problems like timeliness. You know, the more use of technology and the more timing there will be our relations, and they ask you to prepare it before. And then we have big data to manage. But the only thing I would like to underline about this topic is that the directive, we're talking about the 56/2014, requires the auditor, the auditing firm and the auditors to have effective control and safeguarding arrangement for information processing systems. So that means it's a key point. But let me skip a little bit the technology, because what I want to really talk about with you is people. I want to talk about people because, well, when I meet people, talking about people, say like, what do you do? Well, I am a professor of accounting. So, wow. So you got a mathematical mind. Well, I can do subtraction and addition. That's it. Maybe sometimes I can do a percentage, but there is no math in accounting. It's not really a mathematical science. It's much more about people. It's much more about informing. And we do not have to forget that accounting data are prepared by people, are audited by people, are read by people, and influence people's behavior. All this has got implication. First of all, keep it simple. Keep it simple. The more complex is going to be the accounting and report, and it's not working, you know what? Complex languages become extinct. We are in Romania. We are Latin as well. Do we still use declination? Like in Latin and Greek? No, because when something used to communicate gets too complicated, it doesn't work. Second point, but still, if we do it simple, it's still, of course, it's a technical issue. So we need to attract and retain the best and the brightest. So we need to attract the best students and the best young people. And this is difficult because, believe it or not, but accounting is not perceived as a stimulating activity. If you ask a student, what do you want to do in the future? I want to do marketing, I want to do finance, I want to do the manager. So, what about accounting? No, I don't want to do accounting. How on the earth you think you can understand finance if you don't know the accounting? How can the earth you can think you can manage if you don't know anything about cost control? So, an accounting is much more than just numbers. This is, I want to give you a quotation of salary guide. Accounting and finance professional who can turn business intelligence into business strategy are in a high demand. Because there is accounting is communication, and communication today is an asset. The way you can deal with communication, you can use that communication is an essential part. So we need to transfer that in order to attract the best students. Let them understand that accounting is much more than numbers, is much more than a double entry. If you speak with students when they approach universities, they always think accounting is about writing the double entry for the salami seller down the road, which is not exactly the way it is. So we should explain to them. And of course, while doing that, we have to work on training. And training definitely, I think, has been said all that they had to be saying about the common content of training. But one point I want to add about training, it's that we need them to have that our education is to be international oriented. So training cannot be limited to the local regulation. We need to have international need. Why? Because if the world is global, that means the professional can move. And you can achieve that as long as also in the training you have given an international orientation. But this is not a topic just for the young students, because that's we around as well. It's not just the students. And what we can do is to share knowledge, to share what the other have done. And this is for this. I will suggest you this instrument, this tool that C.A.F.R has developed. There is the Global Nodule Gateway. You just can log on the website, and you go there, and it's very well organized with different topics, and it advise you on anything that is interesting in accounting in different sectors, so you can interact, you can know what I don't know, ACCA is doing, or what the Italian Association is doing, or what's happening in other countries. So this is a fundamental tool that you can use to be informed and to stay there. So, especially since my presentation is dividing you from lunch, I feel compelled to close and to tell you the final message is that what about the future? First of all, we need to be IT literate. We need to be we need to understand a bit more about information technology. And we had to go a bit forward from my dad. He was a lawyer, and when the computer came around, he was assigned a computer. And you would step into his room, and the first thing that would shock you is the computer was turned the other way, because it was actually the one who was sitting was using the computer. And then he never used the word print something. He also take it out from there. So he was sure that it was somewhere and you have to take it out. So we have to go a bit forward in that. Second, you have to think globally. And that's what happened in this conference. I see a lot of people from many countries, and this is, again, my congratulations. And third, we have to work and let the other understand that profession is more than number, is an attractive profession. In order to do that, we can do it just being all together. So work together, visit our website, let's try to work together. Thank you.
Are there any questions now?
Just need a glass of water.
Are there any questions
Now
now?
we can move.
Okay, I'll ask you a question, but I'll ask it slowly so you have time to drink a glass of water. As a journalist, I'm impressed about how much you emphasize the need for communication and the need for transparency. And my question is this something new, or is it something very emphasized right now, very developed? Is it something that is related with what happened in the near past during the crisis, or all the time the auditing and the accountancy were about transparency and communicating to the public?
Well, I have to go back to mine.
Okay.
Well, personally, I can see that there is definitely is going more and more. What I'm trying to say, before the 4th European Directive, like in Italy, we had our balance sheet, and it was the joy of all the students, because in the income statement you had 2 items, revenues and costs, and the balance sheet you have 4 items. Now it's getting more and more. There is a lot of talk about, especially there is recently the IFRS, the ISB is working on management report. It's more and more about auditing also and giving information on the management report. Is more than number, and integrated reporting, I think, is one example that we need more. And especially if you think about in the public sector or public utilities, in most cases you are more interested in knowing whether your electricity company, the kind of service is giving, and whether it's sustainable in the future, rather than they had a profit or not. If you have a company that is dealing with rubbish in the street, like rubbish collection, do you care whether they have a profit or whether the street is clean? If it's about hospital, are you more interested in whether the hospital has got a profit, or whether when you step out of the hospital you're just a little bit better than you stepped in? Because if you want to do profit in the hospital, you can just reduce the day, and then if you die, it just will cost less. So I think it's more and more. It's more and more.
Thank you very much. We'll have the Q&A session, the large one, at the end of this panel. Thank you very much again. Now I'd like to invite Cristiana Diola to know more about her point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to be part of the Chamber, the C.A.F.R conference. This 4th Congress really is going very well. There's been some lively discussion, and we're looking forward to how this develops and what other messages are coming through today. So really, I wanted to look at the question of the workshop from the practical experience that ICAW has had as being the largest audit regulator in the UK, always, of course, working with our public oversight body under the auspices of the Financial Reporting Council. This topic is one that resonates, as we've heard, on a European and international context. And as a result, we are looking at practical ways of working with professional bodies across Europe, across the world, our counterparts to address these issues around quality assurance, particularly of the areas which we hope will continue to be delegated to us. In the UK, we have agreement from government that they will be delegated to us, so we're pleased about that. And so we believe that the professional accountancy organisations very much have the experience and are best positioned to continue working in this area in a credible way. I'm pleased that it's not our first interaction here in Romania. We're working very closely with the bodies here in Romania, and indeed we have a forum with fellow professional accountancy bodies which we've named the Accountancy Professional Strategic Forum, where we look at issues such as quality assurance, education, strategic development of professional bodies, and indeed the very first one took place not far from here, Sinai, a few years ago. So it's a great example of how international cooperation can work and bilateral cooperation also. Now, Francesco, you mentioned that you were the obstacle towards lunch, but I think I'm a greater obstacle. So I will, in the time that I have, seek to cover how ICAW works in the area of oversight in the UK, and indeed how we share our experience and work with our counterpart bodies bilaterally and in an organised fashion outside the UK, how we look at and how we view oversight, and the recent results of some monitoring visits in the UK from our last report, and then just some further thoughts before closing. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the UK, the public oversight body is called the Financial Reporting Council. With all respect of the EU legislation, they have ultimate responsibility for the supervision of the audit profession. As such, the ICAW is one of a number of recognised supervisory bodies which the FRC delegates to. Given our history and presence in the UK, the ICAW is currently the largest regulator, audit regulator, with close to 3,500 registered audit firms and around 8,500 responsible individuals who are entitled to sign off audit reports. So, therefore, with regards to our role, presently we are involved in setting and maintaining the audit regulations, registering firms and responsible individuals, working together with the FRC, of course, regulating and disciplining firms through independent committees, and if you'd like to talk about how we've tried to ensure their independence, we can do that a bit later. Of course, we have inspection visits or monitoring visits through our Quality Assurance Department, and our Quality Assurance Department is a distinct and separate department to our other workings as an institute, and of course we ourselves as an institute are subject to the FRC and their inspections on site, and we are more than open to do so. As I mentioned earlier, it's an international issue, and we are working closely with international bodies in this area. Collaboration is very much at the heart of the ethos of ICAEW, and the APSF is one example of that. In addition, we've undertaken a number of projects together with the World Bank, with the UK Finance Development Finance Ministry, and other governments and professional bodies throughout the world to support them in quality assurance, whether that's capacity building, training staff in professional bodies or oversight bodies, sharing some of our tools, or where the jurisdiction is small and they require, if you like, more hands-on approach, then there have been some direct monitoring and outsourcing arrangements also. So the current situation, as I mentioned, is that the Financial Reporting Council is very much responsible for the major audits, or what we call the Public Interest Plus. So it's not just the listed companies, but charities, major pension funds, large private companies. And the FRC carries out whole firm reviews of the firms with at least 10 major audits. Then the smaller firms, if you like, are delegated to ICAW, where currently ICAW carries out monitoring visits of smaller firms, and also major audits carried out by firms that have less than 10 major audits. So if you like, ICAW is currently involved with monitoring and inspecting high audits, and of course that element will have to change in full respect of the legislation that's coming forward. How does our interaction work? Well, QAD, our Quality Assurance Department, and the Audit Quality Review Team, the AQR, which is the team from the Financial Reporting Council, have a very close working relationship. And you can appreciate that it has to be that way on a practical basis so that the firms are able to carry out their planning and the programming of our visits. Otherwise, it would be a very inefficient process. So there are regular contact meetings between ICAW and our oversight body. We carry out joint visits, for example. We share our findings and just ensure that the process is as efficient and as effective as possible. So, I mentioned that the objective of the workshop, I guess having received the title, is how we view oversight. And really the message that we want to give today is that monitoring or inspection is really only one part of how we see oversight contributing to an increase and an improvement, an upgrading, if you will, of audit quality. So how do we help firms improve audit quality? Because ultimately, this is our end goal. And this is what the market expects of us. So, for example, we issue an Audit Essentials report. This is freely available on our website and goes through the outcome of the audit monitoring visits. It goes through and highlights some of the key topical issues, so we can discuss those later if you like. But also, we learn from that. We design training, webinars. Webinars are these online training tools. We design them to be 1 hour long to fit in a lunch break. Now we're designing them to be 7 or 8 minutes long so they can fit between people's breaks and cover particular areas that people are worried about. We keep ongoing communications throughout the year. We telephone them throughout the year. Have you looked at this issue that was picked up in our last visit, and so on. So a very practical approach, very collaborative approach, really to help firms improve, appreciating that ultimately it's a two-way relationship. We're not there just to point out the mistakes, but to help things improve. Again, on a practical level, we prepare guidance materials. We go out to the district society meetings and meet the members and discuss things, informal and informal arrangements and environments. We prepare guidance, fact sheets, mailings, and so on. So the inspection visit per se is, again, as I mentioned, a small part of what we view oversight should be and the type of relationship that should be in place. Not just about the stick, but also the carrot as well, if you like. So just an example here, I'm not going to go through it, but just an example of the kind of main contents of what came out of our last year's series of monitoring visits, and the report which was issued, Audit Essentials 2015. And interestingly, it goes down to, if you like, first principles and some areas which we might think are basic, such as setting the right audit strategy, investing in a planning process which is inclusive and thorough enough, doing a thinking audit. We can talk about that a bit later on. But even areas which you might not suspect might appear, like substantial analytical review and how that's done. So there's a mix of high and low level issues that seem to be consistently appearing. So, in the final part of my presentation today, I wanted to cover just very briefly an overview of some of our findings in the past few years with regards to monitoring and some final thoughts. And in 2014, we carried out just over 650 audit monitoring visits. These were on-site visits and reviewed over 1,100 audits, of which 20 were major, as in public interest entity plus during the year. I think this is an area that I just want to highlight, but broadly, over the last 3 years, we've seen that the results have been consistent. And looking at the C.A.F.R reports, looking at other regulators, we can see that broadly the UK results are comparable. And now whether they're good or bad is a subject of interpretation, but the fact that around 70% are deemed to be satisfactory or generally acceptable is, if you like, the positive side. In terms of moving forward, clearly there's work to be done to support the firms who need improvement or indeed significant improvement to help them upgrade what they're currently doing. And of course, where that doesn't happen, then there's a need for sanctions. At the same time, we ourselves constantly reassess and review what we're doing, talking to our members, talking to the firms about our approach, talking to the oversight body. So that is very much our approach. And bearing in mind developments also in the skill set, the standards around the skill set required, the new things that we should be looking for, the new things that we need to be supporting and providing guidance for. And I just wanted to flag International Education Standard 8 because as from next year, that will be an additional challenge for both professional bodies, regulators and firms to consider. So the whole discussion around audit quality isn't one which is going away. Certainly there is a lot of discussion. This is coming out from, this is initiated from the US Public Oversight Body around whether we need to mandate audit quality indicators. There's a lot of discussion on that, and as an institute we've made an official response and a comment in this area. We certainly see increasing transparency and information as a positive, but there's also a cost and a risk around misinterpretation and misuse, which we put also to the oversight body. The international regulators are more and more talking about the need for firms to go back and carry out root cause analysis of what may have gone wrong, where there have been, if you like, deviations from what's been expected. So that's a debate that they're also looking at, focusing largely also on structural issues within firms. Focus on the effectiveness of ECQRs, second partners reviews, how much is enough, should it be documented, how much documentation, should second partners be involved from the planning stage of the audit. So all these issues around audit quality, if you like, set a context for the work that we do. And of course, and I won't go into it again because it seems to be a recurring theme today, the impact of data analytics and how audit quality is impacted by that is the subject of another conference potentially, but most certainly another challenge for audit quality. Thank you very much for your time.
Question for the public, or we can keep it until the end of the panel, or I can ask 3 questions. We have a question there.
I have one question. You spoke about IF8 and you spoke about the engagement part. Is that part of the initial training or is it part of subsequent education?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question.
Because the feeling is that if people need to be fully qualified to sign off, then the question is if there is information in that package that needs to be done at a prior stage before they can sign off. Then in a small firm you can sign off having finished university and training.
Thank you very much. That's certainly one of the areas that we've raised in our comment letter about the education and when that education should take place. Certainly the professional part of the education, our qualification, for example, the ACA, we're looking at that to ensure that it encompasses the areas that ES8 picks up on, because ES8 doesn't just cover what one might expect, which is the technical requirements for being a professional auditor or accountant, but also ethics, also soft skills, communication skills, much more than we've seen before. It's a broader discussion. It's a discussion which also, as you rightly mentioned, continuous professional development impacts that area, and also university education and the structure of accounting degrees. So yes, an excellent question, and certainly one which impacts all those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Allow me to ask you a question. How would you define an oversight failure? And a follow-up question, depending on your answer.
Do we mean a failure on part of the firm?
Like not seeing things that are meant to be seen.
Well, yes, actually, it's interesting that you picked on one, which is audit documentation, and that's one very big area that's often identified. So there are, of course, particular technical areas which we've seen in the UK reports and the I.F.R. reports around, for example, the rigorousness of auditors challenging management assumptions, around estimates, around impairments of fair value, but documentation is one which features, and it features every time. And if it's not documented, then we have to assume, according to our standards, international standards, that the work hasn't been done.
And going back to the previous presentation, how?
So I have one more presentation. Yes, we'll get there. But I have this question. How would you communicate an oversight failure? How would you communicate?
Well, as an institute,
As an institute,
yes, as an institute, there will be a formal recognition and a formal documentation of the areas which we view are not satisfactory, and that usually is accompanied with an action plan, which is agreed with the firm. There is follow-up throughout the year, and there is support. So, for example, we do have checklists, but if there hasn't been a cold file review, just to be practical, then we do have one that we can give them, and there is training that can be given. So we were expecting them to have learned from that, if you like, error, and then for an improvement to be in place. So yes, there is an action plan, and there are sanctions, but the approach is not to go directly for the sanction, but to help them, give them an opportunity, and then really, if we see that it's really not happening, then sanctions it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Now let me invite Madame Michel Leguerinet. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, je sais qu'il va être bientôt l'heure de déjeuner, donc ça va être un petit peu difficile, mais je vais essayer de vous présenter en fait des travaux que nous avons menés au sein de la FIDEF avec un regard un peu différent. On va sortir d'Europe et on va essayer de se positionner dans des pays où il n'y a pas encore de contrôle qualité, où en tout cas la question se pose, et nous avons essayé de travailler ensemble pour imaginer comment aider ces pays à aller plus vite, si c'est possible, parce qu'on sait que vous l'avez tous vécu dans vos pays respectifs en Europe, c'est un chantier très long à mener, très difficile à mener. Donc comment on peut trouver des solutions pour être plus efficace et en tout cas mettre l'accent sur les points sensibles. Et je vais notamment insister sur certains points.
Bună ziua, știu că ne mai dați foarte puțin timp până la pauza de prânz, așa că o să vă iau undeva în afară de contextul obișnuit, în afară de ceea ce cunoaștem și să ajungem în niște locuri unde nu există încă un control al calității în sensul propriu-zis. Ideea este cum putem să facem ca aceste țări să progreseze mai rapid și cum să găsim o soluție la problemele cu care se confruntă ele. Și o să insist pe mai multe aspecte.
En fait, pour ça, nous sommes obligés finalement de nous repositionner sur des contextes légaux, des contextes économiques, des contextes humains qui sont très différents. Et derrière humain, je vais pas citer le mot politique, mais je crois que c'est le mot politique qu'il faut entendre, c'est-à-dire la capacité en fait pour certains États de comprendre, de connaître de quoi il s'agit quand on parle de contrôle qualité. Et c'est un des premiers obstacles que l'on peut rencontrer. Tout à l'heure, on a parlé de communication. En fait, c'est un mot-clé qui a suivi tout le long de nos travaux. Il faut communiquer. Et en fait, il faut communiquer en interne et il faut communiquer en externe. Et finalement, pour résumer, ce que nous avons essayé de faire, c'est de dire comment faire se rejoindre le professionnel dans son cabinet, qui peut avoir des réticences, et ce qu'on va appeler globalement des consommateurs d'informations financières qui ont des attentes. Comment faire que l'institution professionnelle joue un rôle de communicant, de formateur pour ses membres et ses utilisateurs sur ces sujets-là.
Și pentru că am ajuns în acest cadru, este foarte important să facem legătura cu contextul, vorbind de contextul din punct de vedere juridic, din punct de vedere economic și toate aceste contexte sunt foarte diferite. N-am pronunțat în mod special cuvântul context politic, pentru că acolo vorbim în primul rând de capacitatea de înțelegere și de cunoaștere a standardelor despre care vorbim atunci când vorbim despre controlul calității. Dacă le cunoaștem, atunci le putem și comunica. Și este foarte important ca această comunicare să funcționeze în interiorul profesiei, dar și în exteriorul profesiei. Pe scurt, voi vorbi despre cum putem să aducem împreună pe cei care exercită profesia în acest domeniu și așteptările utilizatorilor serviciilor prestate. Care este rolul comunicării și care este rolul comunicării în formarea profesională.
Sachant que pour rajouter à la complexité du sujet, il faut aussi avoir conscience que certains pays n'ont pas de ressources. C'est-à-dire que nous avons très peu de professionnels dans certains pays. Donc il faut avoir conscience que quand vous avez un institut professionnel où il y a par exemple dans certains pays 20 professionnels, on ne fait pas la même chose que quand on est 1000, voire 1000 ou plus. Et ça, c'est une très très grande difficulté. Donc l'intérêt de l'exercice, c'est aussi d'être original et de trouver des solutions. Et c'était en fait l'objectif de cet atelier que nous avons mené. Et je vais essayer de vous redonner en fait certains des éléments que nous avons mis en avant.
De asemenea, când vorbim de complexitate, trebuie să ne gândim la lipsa de resurse și vorbim de lipsa de resurse profesionale. Există țări, locuri în lume, unde această profesie are, să zicem, 20 de membri. Și atunci lucrurile stau foarte diferit într-o țară în care există atât de puțini membri, comparabil cu o țară unde există 1000 de membri în profesie și unde există un institut care poate să gestioneze această profesie. Dificultățile sunt majore și de aceea în demersul nostru ne-am gândit, am avut în vedere acest element de originalitate și de găsire a unei soluții într-o situație care este un pic particulară.
Donc en fait, le point de départ que nous partageons tous, ce sont les dispositifs de l'IFAC. En l'occurrence, le premier texte qui s'applique aux membres de l'IFAC. Et en fait, quand on mène nos travaux en matière de qualité, bien évidemment, notre objectif, c'est de permettre à tous nos pays de devenir membres de l'IFAC. Donc, on se positionne d'emblée dans le contexte proposé par l'IFAC, donc avec une première obligation qui est celle que l'on doit respecter quand on devient membre, ou en tout cas qu'on nous invite à respecter, qui s'appelle SMO1, qui concerne la qualité. Et pour nous, deux textes importants que l'on a mis, qu'on a intégrés automatiquement et aussitôt avec, c'est ISCQ1, la qualité, à l'échelle du cabinet, et ISA 220, la qualité à l'échelle du dossier.
Punctul de pornire al efortului nostru a fost punctul de pornire pe care îl cunoaștem cu toții, și anume IPA. Știm că dacă o țară vrea să devină membru IPA, atunci trebuie să respecte anumite standarde. Noi am pornit de la primul text, SMO1, este vorba de un standard pe care toată lumea trebuie să respecte pentru a deveni membru și ne-am sprijinit pe alte două standarde, ISCQ1, standardul de controlul calității, și ISA 220.
Je ne vais pas revenir sur un certain nombre d'approches et de solutions techniques que vous avez évoquées les uns les autres, puisqu'effectivement, quand on fait du contrôle qualité, on le fait tous de la même façon. En revanche, On va se poser des questions, par exemple dans des zones géographiques où il y a très peu de professionnels, il y a un facteur très important que l'on a voulu mettre en avant, et c'est souvent des non-dits quand on parle de ça, c'est le facteur humain. La réticence de l'individu face au contrôle. Il faut tout de suite traiter ce sujet. On ne peut pas permettre de dire j'applique un schéma tout fait et j'oublie que je travaille pour des hommes, sur des hommes. C'est la dimension humaine qu'on évoquait tout à l'heure, elle est vraie pour le praticien et elle est vraie pour l'utilisateur des comptes. D'où l'intérêt de ne jamais déconnecter tous ces sujets-là. Donc, une des réflexions que l'on a faites, c'est, et dans une autre vie, j'ai fait beaucoup d'actions de formation et de coopération. La première chose qu'on me disait quand j'avais parlé de contrôle qualité, ah oui, mais moi je ne veux pas que lui vienne me contrôler. Donc, il faut qu'on sache tout de suite traiter ces solutions-là. Dans des pays où il y a peu de membres, il faut trouver d'autres solutions. Les autres solutions, ça peut être la mutualisation entre pays. On est sous un même droit ou un droit comparable. On peut imaginer collaborer sur le contrôle qualité, à la fois dans la conception des systèmes et dans la réalisation du système.
Nu o să reiau lucrurile care au fost deja spuse, pentru că până la urmă, când vorbim despre controlul calității, cu toții lucrăm în același fel. O să insist asupra unor factori care se manifestă cu preponderență acolo unde personalul este foarte puțin numeros, și anume factorul uman. În astfel de zone există tot timpul o reticență a oamenilor față de această idee de inspecție, de control. Este o problemă pe care trebuie să o rezolvăm în primul rând. Să nu uităm că atunci când vorbim despre aplicarea normelor, trebuie să ne gândim că aceste norme se aplică asupra unor ființe umane, că de fapt lucrăm cu niște oameni, iar interesul nostru în proiectul pe care l-am dezvoltat a privit în special acest aspect. Să știți că am fost implicată în foarte multe proiecte internaționale și adesea mi s-a întâmplat să ajung la cineva, la un profesionist din acest domeniu, care mi-a spus eu nu vreau să îmi verifice activitatea el sau ea, o anumită persoană. Deci, confruntați cu astfel de situații, trebuie să găsim o soluție diferită. Uneori soluția înseamnă reciprocitate. În cele din urmă, dacă lucrăm cu aceleași norme, de ce nu ne-am putea gândi la o reciprocitate între experții care lucrează în diferite țări? Un soi de mutualizare, dacă vreți, ar fi cuvântul în franceză, în engleză.
Donc, très vite, parmi les solutions que l'on met en évidence, en fait, c'est le fait de mener plusieurs chantiers en parallèle. Premier chantier, la communication avec les autorités du pays, le gouvernement, les ministères compétents, les, par exemple, représentants du patronat, toutes ces structures qui seront en fait, qui sont les consommateurs des comptes. Deuxième volet, l'organisation au sein de l'institution professionnelle. Et troisième volet, les professionnels eux-mêmes. Et pour gagner du temps, essayer de mener ces chantiers-là en parallèle. Et en fait, l'argument qui nous permet en interne de jouer une carte efficace, c'est ISCQR. Et c'est vraiment se focaliser sur comment aider les professionnels à mettre en place une qualité interne. C'est-à-dire les sensibiliser à l'intérêt de la qualité pour eux-mêmes, pour leurs clients. Et les préparer ainsi, en fait, à recevoir le contrôle externe. Mais qui, dès lors, ne devient plus une difficulté, ce n'est que l'échelon final de leur propre processus de contrôle interne.
Pentru a găsi o soluție, ne-am gândit să abordăm în paralel trei aspecte diferite. Primul aspect a privit comunicarea și vorbesc de comunicarea cu instituțiile, cu guvernul, cu ministerele, cu asociațiile patronale. Apoi ne-am gândit să plasăm această idee a controlului de calitate în interiorul unei instituții profesionale. Și a treia componentă sau a treia linie de acțiune, să aducem calitatea în sânul profesiei. Și am găsit și am folosit ca argumente chiar acest standard ISCQ1, care s-a aflat chiar în centrul discuției. pentru că am încercat să promovăm calitatea în interiorul profesiei, să îi pregătim pe cei care fac această profesie pentru a adopta calitatea din interior, pentru ca apoi să poată accepta ideea de inspecție a calității din exterior.
Également très important, renforcer le système. Pour renforcer le système, c'est notamment la légalisation. C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, ce que je disais tout à l'heure, la réticence humaine, il faut qu'elle ait une limite. Je ne peux pas tout refuser. Si je refuse, il y a une sanction. Également, les apports d'outils. Et on a mis en place, alors moi j'ai mené ce chantier au Sénégal en particulier, on a procédé par exemple par, je dirais, de la confraternité, c'est-à-dire qu'on a créé des groupes de travail pour développer des outils, des méthodologies de travail, pour que les gens n'aient plus de réticence à travailler entre eux, pour améliorer leurs méthodes, créer leurs propres outils s'il le faut, et en tout cas mieux s'approprier des outils externes quand ils existent. Donc c'était à tout point de vue la mutualisation, commencer à travailler sur cette approche. Et très bizarrement, ça a bien marché. Parce qu'on pouvait là aussi se dire, et en plus j'ajoute pour la complexité, que ça a été piloté par des confrères exerçant dans des grands cabinets. Donc il peut y avoir une double réticence, et elle n'a pas eu lieu.
Pentru a întări acest sistem, în primul rând am avut nevoie de niște instrumente legale. Niște instrumente legale cu care să combatem această reticență, pentru că, bineînțeles, putem să acceptăm că există lucruri pe care le respingi, față de care manifestă o reticență, dar nu poți să respingi absolut totul, pentru că dacă respingi totul, atunci trebuie să existe un sistem de penalizare. După care am dezvoltat un sistem de instrumente prin care oamenii au dezvoltat un fel de sentiment de colegialitate. Era vorba de oameni care au început să conștientizeze faptul că lucrează în același domeniu, că pot folosi aceeași metodă sau că pot împrumuta o metodă din afară în cazul în care această metodă există. Un lucru care, deși poate mi s-a părut neobișnuit, a funcționat. Apoi, un lucru iarăși important este că am implicat marile firme care au transferat cunoștințele cabinetelor mai mici.
Donc, pour terminer, en fait, parce que je ne veux pas prendre trop de temps non plus, on a bâti un schéma comme celui que vous voyez à l'écran, qui matérialise en fait la conduite du projet en parallèle sur la partie organisation d'institutions et contacts avec les parties tierces et l'organisation au sein de la profession avec la préparation en fait des professionnels pour subir, entre guillemets, le contrôle qualité. Sachant qu'en fait l'intérêt au sein de la FIDEF de regrouper plein de pays de taille, d'environnements différents, puisque comme je vous l'ai dit tout à l'heure, on est sur 4 continents, donc ça donne vraiment quand même une lecture assez différente, mais sur la base d'une culture commune, on peut partager des outils et des méthodologies très facilement. Et donc ça, c'est un atout assez fantastique que l'on a vraiment mis en avant au cours de ces ateliers de travail.
Avem și o scurtă schemă aici, unde puteți să vedeți felul în care am condus acest proiect. Vedeți pe de o parte instituțiile implicate în controlul calității, apoi controlul calității efectuat de către o terță parte și controlul din interiorul profesiei. Din punct de vedere al FIDEF-ului, noi suntem o organizație foarte mare, cu țări importante. Gândiți-vă că suntem prezenți în 4 continente, ceea ce schimbă un pic perspectiva, dar e vorba de țări care au o cultură comună pe baza căreia se poate gândi această abordare comună a calității.
Donc, en fait, en conclusion, à partir de cet atelier, il y a un certain nombre de partenariats qui se sont mis en place, certains avaient déjà été engagés, donc des partenariats nord-sud, des partenariats sud-sud, mais bizarrement aussi des partenariats nord-nord, chose qu'on n'avait pas imaginée. Donc finalement, ça a été beaucoup plus loin que ce que l'on attendait, et à partir de ça, les choses vraiment se sont engagées. Alors, on aura toujours des réticents, ça on y peut bien, mais dans un environnement où l'institution, même avec peu de moyens, aura tendu la main à ses membres, donc se sera donné la chance, en fait, de réussir le projet. Celui qui reste réticent quand on ne va pas aller vers lui, ça reste son problème. Mais, en tout cas, l'idée, c'est d'aller, de communiquer, de former, de se donner les moyens d'aller vers les autres. Et c'est vraiment ce qu'on a essayé de faire sortir, en fait, de cet atelier. Je vous remercie.
Acest atelier a dat naștere unor parteneriate nord-sud, sud-sud și poate părea surprinzător, dar și parteneriate nord-nord, lucru pe care nu ni le imaginam. Am putea spune, deci, că prin acest atelier am putut să facem un pas înainte. Evident, există încă reticență va exista întotdeauna, dar într-un loc în care nu există instituțiile, acest atelier a reprezentat o mână de ajutor. Acolo unde nu există instituțiile adecvate, putem să mergem, să ajutăm și să formăm profesia. Vă mulțumesc!
Mulțumim foarte mult, thank you very much. Mersi beaucoup. Vă propun să alegeți dumneavoastră dacă adresăm una, două întrebări acum sau dacă le adresăm în pauza de masă. If you want to address some further question now or during the lunch break. Who is for the lunch break? I know what your smile is saying. Thank you very much for joining us here. Now we have a lunch break. Let me tell you the time frame.